Hi, my name is Mike Perry. I'm a freelance illustrator, storyboard artist, and concept artist. Today, I'm going to be doing a demonstration on how I quick sketch likenesses for work. Um, the process I use is the exact same process I would use if I was drawing with pencil on paper. For the purposes of this demo, I use Photoshop. I'm drawing digitally, but don't let that fool you. You can do this exact same technique and repeat it yourself using any material you'd like. So without further ado, I'll get started with the demonstration. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, please let me know and I'll do my best to answer. Okay, so this is my drawing on the right, and this is my reference that I used on the left. And what I want to talk before we begin is references. When you're making any kind of drawing off of or from observation, you want to make sure you have good reference to start off with. Set yourself up for success, so get the best reference that you can. And the reason I chose this reference is because it is a good representation of the character. We get some nice expression. It's not very complicated. It's going to be easy for us, for the purpose of this lecture, it's for me to break it down and describe the forms and the process. But we have strong lights, strong darks. We got a little bit of reflected lights. It makes it a little more interesting. It's not too complicated. It's just all around it's good reference. What you really are looking for is something that is crisp and clean, not blurry, high resolution and strong lighting. Very good lights and darks. It really simplifies things for you, makes it easier for you when you're trying to figure out the forms and the planes and figuring out all the different values that go into a drawing or when you're making a drawing. Now, this is an example of terrible reference. The reason why I say it's terrible reference is because it's flat, boring lighting. It's probably, it looks like he's on the set of Oprah underneath a whole bunch of fluorescent lights. It's flat. If we made this on a scale of 1 to 10 on the grayscale, the whole image would probably be somewhere between 4 and 6, at least his likeness. And what you really need is a range. You need strong darks, strong lights. I know I've said it before and I'll keep saying it, but you really do need contrast and a whole range of values if you're going to be able to make an accurate portrait of somebody. Now, this is really flat. It's kind of blurry. It's low res. It's bland lighting. It's going to be really hard to really pick out the forms and describe him in any great detail. It's good for a cartoon or a caricature, but it's not really much if you're trying to do an accurate, detailed likeness. Now, this here is better reference. What you can see, it's strong lights and darks. It's very crisp. It's high resolution. It's dynamic. It's interesting. There's not a lot of darks, but there's enough for you to go with, and everything that you need is there. It's stated. The reason why I say it's not the best reference, and especially not for the purpose of this lecture, is that it's complicated reference. He's screaming on the left. His mouth is open. He's smiling. He's emoting. And whenever you start throwing in dynamic emotions, it just adds a level of complexity to the drawing. Your eyes squint. You've got wrinkles around your eye. You've got all these folds in your chin. You've got your face changes dramatically. There's so many muscles in your face, and there's so much that you have to take into account and pay attention to. It just adds an extra level of difficulty to your drawing. And for the purpose of this lecture, we're going to go with something a little more simplified, a little easier. And when you're just starting out learning to draw, I wouldn't say don't try drawing this type of subject, but allow yourself to explore it, learn about it, and don't be so discouraged if you don't get an exact likeness, because it's an extra level of difficulty, and it's something I would encourage you to maybe work up to, especially if you're a beginner and you're just starting out. And now again, this is good reference. Now, I already talked a bit about the one on the left. The one on the right, however, the reason I put that here is because it's good enough. It's got everything you need. It's got strong lights, strong darks, we have an accurate likeness, we have enough detail, it's interesting lighting, and it's a little blurry, but it's not too bad. It doesn't have to be razor sharp, but it has to give you everything you need in order to make a good likeness and a decent portrait. So it's something to consider. And black and white is another, it's something that it's a great help when you're learning to draw. If you draw things in black and white, because we usually work in black and white, we're using graphite, pencils, ink, that sort of thing. Color is another level of, it's another layer to the process, and an extra level, well, an extra layer of work, and some people say it's an extra level of difficulty. And, if you're going to be drawing black and white, using black and white tools, you might as well use black and white reference. And then you can just focus on the values and the shapes. You don't have to worry about the color and, that sort of thing. So, work from black and white if you can, and just pay attention to lighting and quality reference. So, and with that, now we'll get started with the drawing process. Okay, so before I begin with the lecture, I just want to give a brief description of my drawing process. And my drawing process is largely based off of the Andrew Loomis method, which is a tried and tested drawing method that works for me and has been used by countless artists over the years to help them understand the human form, and especially when you're drawing faces, it's a really good method for breaking up the face and figuring out where all the features go on the head while you're drawing it. And you always start off with a basic shape. You can start off with a ball here, and this represents the cranium, and we're already working out three-dimensional spaces of seeing this diagram here. He's working out these quadrants here, making it look more like a three-dimensional object, right? And then you're figuring out where your quadrants are. Then the next stage would be here. He's taking that ball, and then this is the chin. So this mark here would be the brow line right here. Then down here would be the chin, the bottom of the chin. And the nose line, the bottom of the nose, is always halfway between the top of the brow, or the brow line, and the chin line right here. And this mark here would be your hairline, where your hairline begins, roughly. So already you can see what he's doing here. It's already starting to take shape and look like a human head. Now we go over to here, and this is just a more technical version of the previous diagram, and you can see here, this is how it works out more practically. You've got the bottom of the nose is roughly around here, you got the bottom of the chin, the eyebrows, the hairline, and then you start to work out where the rest of the features go based off of those fundamental placements when you're working out your drawing. Now here you can see it's much more refined, but he's still, he's using all the same landmarks, all the same processes, and he's just putting in his features and making the drawing happen. More or less, this is how I do my process. I start off with a rough shape. I start to break it down into, placement, and then you just go from there and build based off of that. I'm not going to go into an anatomy lesson talking about, the eyeballs and where they go and how big they are and how they interact with the socket and all that kind of stuff. That's a different lecture altogether. For the purpose of this lecture, we're talking about how I draw an accurate likeness relatively quickly and easily with any old drawing tool. Okay, so let's begin with the lecture. Okay, so first I just get my reference ready, and I begin by just starting with basic gesture, the overall shapes, obviously circle or sphere for his head, an egg shape, and I mark out my center line for the face and my brow line, and then I'm just starting to rough in my landmarks, the nose, the ears, the planes of the cheek, the hairline, or where his hairline would be. At this stage, I'm not too worried about accuracy. I'm just blocking the shapes in, putting the shapes in. And throughout the process, once I get them in place, then it's a matter of pushing and pulling, tweaking, adjusting, getting them where I want them to be, to refine it to get an accurate likeness. But at this stage, it's just, okay, he's got lips, where's his lips? He's got a chin, where's his chin? What is the outside line of his cheek? What's it look like? That's roughly where it is. Part of the reason I work fast is to capture some energy, some gesture, some looseness, so the drawing doesn't remain stiff. That is something that happens quite often when you just take a lot of time and noodle over every little aspect over and over and over again. The drawing tends to stiffen up. So at the early stages of any kind of drawing, I try to block it in fast. I try to use my whole arm, not just my wrist, to create those marks, and hopefully some of that energy remains when we get to the final drawing, in theory. So here I'm just working on the eyes, getting those iris, so I've initially put in my basic placements for the features, and now it's a matter of refining it. So you knock out your first basic statements, where are the lips, where's the nose, and now you're like, okay, well, what is the shape? What is the rough shape of the right nostril? What is the shape of the upper lip, and how does it fold and connect with the lower lip? And those are the thoughts going through my mind as I'm creating my marks. Where do things go? What does the shape look like? Let's mark it out. The width of the eyebrow. The furrow of his brow. And gradually through that process, we will start to see the likeness emerge. Now this drawing is sped up a couple times. Obviously I don't draw this fast, but I think I spent about an hour roughing out the figure or the face, and maybe another hour and a half total. I don't know, 45 minutes. So let's ballpark say an hour 45 minutes to do this whole project from beginning to end, with breaks in the middle and phone calls and pauses and whatever. But roughly that's the time I put into drawing something like this. Some days it goes faster than others. Don't put a time limit on yourself. Your drawing, this should be enjoyable. This should be a fun experience, and there's no right way or wrong way. Just take your time. So what I just did there, which is a nice feature of Photoshop, is I was able to rotate the portrait so the angle more closely resembles that of my reference. That is something that is nice with Photoshop, but if you're drawing on a piece of paper, you can just turn your paper and go from there. I'm using Photoshop for the purposes of this demonstration, but you can use any tool you want to draw with. It doesn't matter. I find this is a fairly good approximation of what it would be like to draw with a pencil. I just have more flexibility, for erasing and rotating and that kind of thing. But all the concepts are still the same. So just because I'm drawing this in Photoshop doesn't mean you have to. And you could draw this with a brush and ink if you wanted, and just take your time. It's really up to you. So at this stage, I'm just revisiting all of my statements, trying to block in, or I'm blocking in more so the features. And what I'm looking for at this stage is I'm starting to pick out and landmark where the shape of the shadows lie. So when you're drawing the face, you break it up. I break it up into planes, the top of the head, the side of the head, that sort of thing, a little more three-dimensionally. And so I'm starting to think about now where the details are, but also what is the shape of that shadow? What is the shape of that light spot? And where is it going to go? Now he has a really strong rim light effect on his left cheek, which creates that nice dramatic shadow interplay from his left side of his face to his right side of his face. But I'm doing all this as a preparatory step before I start adding in any kind of tone. And it also, I'm still working out accuracy. Before I lay in tone, I'm going to try to make the drawing as accurate as I can. There's two ways you can do it. You could knock out the tone in broad strokes and then later on adjust the accuracy based off of what you've done tonally. And that's one way to do it. It's a little more painterly and organic. And in the case of this demonstration, I'm going to keep reworking this drawing until I'm comfortable or happy with the likeness, and then I'll go in and lay in some tone. So at this stage, it's just going to be lots of me going back and forth over the drawing, changing this, adjusting that, finding out I don't like this, finding out I do like that, and then adjusting something else accordingly. You always want to compare scale. So, do those eyes look like they're the same size? Do they look like the distance between each other is accurate? You're always measuring with your eyes what looks right. And you'll see throughout this process that I end up making adjustments to this ear probably 5 times. Like here we go. Here's one. I decided the ear was just too big, and then I'm scaling it down. The ear, as a general rule of thumb, the bottom of the earlobe lines up with the bottom of the nostril, and the top of the ear lines up with the top of the eyebrow. It's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, all human faces are different, and there's an infinite variety, but it's something to use as a general rule. Now here you can see I'm drawing over the reference, and I'm just marking out the distances, and you can see just from that little sketch that the space between the top of his eyebrow to the top of his head is smaller than the space between the eyebrow and his jaw. And that's one way you can nicely or easily visualize what needs to be changed or how your scales are working. And I suggest you can do that. And if you don't want to do that and draw on top of your reference directly, you could always get a piece of paper, like some tissue paper or some vellum, and draw on top of it and help you work out the structure as you see fit. Again, there's no rules. Drawing should be fun, and use whatever tools you think you need to get the job done to your satisfaction. And here I'm starting to go in. I'm not liking how strong my marks are. The more you go over a section of a drawing, the darker the lines get, the thicker the lines get, and it starts to dominate and blast out the detail, but also make the detail look a little more cartoony. So in this stage, I've gone over that area. I lightly erased it, and now I'm going back in with a little bit finer of a brush, and I'm drawing it again. Drawing back into what I had previously drawn, and now I'm trying to refine those curves of the eye and the shape of the lower eyebrow, the lower line of his eyebrow. And I'll do that for both eyes, and I'll probably do that across the face throughout this process. I don't like this, change that. Nothing's sacred. If it's not working, change it. The Rock has an interesting fold to his eye. The eyelid overlaps the eyeball in a sense. It creates this heavy lidded look, this depth. It's not as apparent on his left eye. You can see the full eyelid and how it sinks into the eye socket, but on the right eye it comes down over the eyelid, and the the line to suggest the eyelid is not as well defined. What's one thing to watch out for when you're drawing from reference or drawing people in general? We are not symmetrical. Some people's ears are, one ear is bigger than the other. One side of their mouth, when they smile, it's crooked, or they tend to squint one eye and have one eye open. That is how we are built. We are raised, or as we develop, we tend to look for symmetry and process. When we look at a human face, we just think, and our brain automatically assumes things are symmetrical. But when you sit down and analyze a face through something like the drawing process, you will notice that no two eyes are the same, and part of the way we express and we emote is one eye will get bigger than the other when we're trying to express a certain thing. And quite often artists will struggle with capturing a likeness because they will automatically try to make the eyes look identical to one another instead of drawing what they see. Subconsciously they're trying to compare the two eyes, and they just, well, this eye looks like that, then that eye needs to look like that. And that's just simply not the case. So my advice is to always follow the reference. Stick to what you're observing. Draw what you see, because there's truth in that. And what you see, whether someone says it's right or wrong, it's what you see and what you observe, and that's what makes your drawing unique. So, maybe I'm getting a little too wordy here, but that's how I view it, and that's what makes art art. So enjoy yourself, draw what you see, and if you don't like it, well, at least you're learning from it, and every drawing you get a little bit better, and the process evolves a bit more from there. Here I am going back in on that ear. Something about the curves and shapes of his ear, it was a real problem for me. I don't really know how to explain it. It's just I kept going back in, and I just wasn't satisfied with it. And the ear is not necessarily a landmark that people tend to like. It won't make or break your portrait. Most people don't even pay attention to the ear. When you look at a face in a magazine or something, you're rarely looking at the ear. You might be looking at the person's eyes, nose, mouth, their smile, their expression, their outfit, their hairstyle, or the earrings or whatever, but you're not actually looking at the ear in great depth. At least most people don't. And it's not a crucial feature that you should try to use as the foundation for your drawing. But nonetheless, for me, I want things to look accurate, so I just keep working it until I find something that I'm satisfied with enough to at least move on. At some point, we'll see I make even further adjustments to his lips and his mouth area, the muzzle area. I will adjust it and make his lips bigger and lower them. But here I'm just working out that fold of his lower jaw. One thing that is problematic when you're drawing a human face, especially someone with a broad, round jaw like that, like he's a muscly man, he's got a lot of meat on that jaw, and the jawline is not straight like you would see in a cartoon. It's rounded. It subtly curves back over and under his jaw and connects with his neck. It creates a sort of round edge, and you can see there's even reflected light when we zoom in on the reference here. But it's something to be aware of, that a really hard line, strong line on that jaw, especially at an early stage in a drawing like this, can really flatten out your drawing and weigh in your mind. So just one other tidbit to think about. Here we go. Now I'm getting into that adjustments phase. Let's make that those lips lower, the jaw bigger. At this phase in the drawing, the likeness is pretty close, and I will spend the next little while just tweaking and refining, cleaning up some of my construction lines, and preparing to get ready for adding in some value. I'd say, you know, the top and the bottom of the face are pretty much set. Now I'll be spending most of my time just making micro adjustments to the nose and the lips and the accuracy, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. That nostril shape, I do end up having some fun with that and spending some time. I'm trying to round those edges. I initially blocked them in as quite blocky, but now I'm going back in and trying to, you know, round them out and add more clarity to the lines that I've made. And that bean shape of his nostril, it's a strong dark on a light face, so it's something that you want to think about. Again, you know, so for in this drawing, there are strong lights and darks. He's got a very dark left-hand side of the face, very bright right-hand side of the face, and things like that. Those strong dark eyes, those strong dark nostril, that creates a real contrast on those planes, and they really do pop out. And so something that you want to try to get right, and in order to create that accuracy that we're going for. Yeah, here I am, changing that ear again. I do bounce around the drawing quite a bit, and I'm noticing that here. You know, you can work an area and then kind of get lost noodling away, refining things. So it's good for your eyes to readjust, move to a different segment of the body and work on that, and then come back to what you're working on. And you know, you just keep scanning back and forth across the model. Here I'm trying to indicate the shapes of the areas that are going to go into tone, you know, just suggesting, you know, that this area is going to be a little bit of a half tone. This is roughly the area that's going to be in shadow or a different tone. I don't make those statements using really dark lines. It's more of a shorthand for me, just to suggest, okay, this is where I think a tonal area is going to go, and this is where I think I'm going to work from. It just, oh, yeah. So here this is okay. I'm ready to get into tone at this point. So to continue my point, I blocked out my shadow areas with like where I'm going to put my tones, and here you can see where now I'm using those landmarks that I made just to knock out my basic values, right? I'm trying to preserve the light spots, the lightest spots, but I'm going for a mid value here, just to these are areas that have some values, and I'm just blocking it in. And we will go in, and really from here it starts off. You block in your shapes and your shadows, and then you work from here. You just, same thing, you go back and forth across the image to refine the likeness and to refine what you see. This rendering stage tends to go a lot quicker. A lot of the hard work, the heavy lifting, is done in the drawing stage, or the planning stage. Now we are thinking a lot about things like the planes of the face and the light and shadow as it's depicted in the reference. You can see there I've erased that strong cheek line. It was just too dark of a line. It's actually quite subtle when you look at the photo reference. And here I'm suggesting, the overall shape of the head. Early in this lay-in, I'm not looking too much at suggesting the curves of the planes on the face, suggesting the actual shape of the face. I'm more or less just trying to block in. First I block in, basic mid-tone. And now I'm going in here and I'm trying to be a little more mindful about my marks, and I'm going in and trying to make statements about the darker areas. I'm restating the eyelash, upper eyelid, and where his eye, the darkest darks basically is what I'm going for here. You always want to think in with your values, your tones, light, middle, dark. Keep it simple. When you get into anything between that, so from light to middle, those we would call those halftones, and then dark to middle, halftones. Halftones, you can get lost in halftones, the subtlety of the different, variations in value, and which is fine when you're going for an accurate reference, but when you're accurate drawing. But when you're starting in the beginning of a drawing, you want to focus on, light, dark. Think about shadows, lights, where they fall on them, and how they move across the form. And if you get your original lights and darks down to a place where you're happy with them, you feel accurate, then working out the middle tones is just a matter of filling in the blanks. I know that sounds a bit like make it sound a lot easier than it is, but through consistent study, you'll get there and you'll understand what I mean. Here I'm trying to use some of my marks around his chin to also not only add value, but I'm also trying to describe the stubble on his face. Mark making can be a real powerful tool in the sketching process to suggest details and features. You're not only just adding tone, but you're also suggesting, oh, there's some stubble here, there's wrinkle here, or this is the texture. That's the word I'm looking for, texture. You can use your marks to help you describe texture. There we go. And when you use your marks to say, in this case I used perpendicular marks on his cheek, you can build up value, but also you can create visual interest and suggest the turning of the forms just by changing the direction of your marks. So think about that when you are mark making, when you are laying down your marks. Move your pencil around, hold your pencil differently. What kind of change does that do to your drawing, or to the overall statement you're trying to create? Have fun with it. See what you come up with. That is one of the drawbacks of working digitally, is you don't have as much freedom when it comes to your tool and how you hold it. If I was holding a brick of graphite, I could maybe hold the stylus differently. I could approach it from a different angle. I could move my arm in a more flamboyant manner. Working digitally, I'm more or less at this stage stuck to holding my pencil or my stylus like I would normally hold a pencil, and that does place limitations on the types of marks I can make. Don't be afraid to use the side of your lead and to get wider marks, maybe lighter marks, broader marks. Mark making can be a lot of fun and can really produce some interesting results with your drawing. So here it's really coming together. A lot of the basic statements are there. I will be just going in from here, and now I'm using a white pencil or white marks to further refine the highlights and make some of the details pop, clean up the drawing, give it pay attention a little bit more to, or use this as a way to bring in a little more accuracy and pop to my sketch. You can do that too with white pencils, white ink, whatever, if you're using traditional medium. Another thing that you could use as an option to further add interest to your drawing would be to start off with toned paper, and that's really neat for when you're drawing to give you some value. You already have your mid-tone built in when you start your drawing process, and from there you're just adding lights and darks, which can be really fun and make some very interesting drawings, and you can get some really neat value statements from that. So that's one other thing to consider. But yeah, I like going in with some white marks, a white pencil, just to pick out those details. Here I am able to suggest the stubble and refine some of those lines on his face. Some areas are a little darker than I'd like them to be, so then I go in and lighten them up with my white pencil, and I'm cleaning up some construction lines, working on that ear again. And here I'm able to describe that rim light on his backside of his head a bit more using the white. It's still the same principle. We're pushing and pulling, refining as we go. Some things I like, some things I don't. Change this, add that, erase that. That process is continuous throughout your drawing experience, and bouncing back between light and dark. That's just one more tool you can use as you're working. So here I am comparing the final drawing to the reference, and of course you sign it and we're done. So yeah, this is my fundamentally this is my process when I'm doing portrait sketching, and I hope you learned something from this, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and send me an email, and if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And if you have any other suggestions or comments, things that maybe you'd like me to do a demonstration, drawing demonstration on, or painting, or anything like that, let me know, or let the people at the Arts Council know, and perhaps we can put together another demo. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.